betrayal, boundaries, and the burden of forgiveness. One woman's journey through family, loyalty, and self-respect. Jane had always seen herself as a strong woman. In her 53 years, she'd weathered life's storms with dignity, balancing her responsibilities as a wife, mother, and professional. She'd married Roger in her early 20s, and for over 2 decades, they'd built what she believed was a secure, if somewhat predictable, family life. They had children, a comfortable home, and a community of friends. Jane took comfort in routine, believing that stability was a hallmark of a well-lived life. But life has a way of testing even the most stable structures. Just when Jane thought she knew the extent of her husband's faults, a devastating revelation threw her world off balance. Roger, whom she'd always trusted to be steady and loyal, confessed to having an affair with a woman half his age. The betrayal was a painful shock. Not because Jane still loved him deeply, truthfully. Their marriage had settled into the companionship of habit more than passion, but because she had believed in their partnership. She had forgiven Roger, thinking they could navigate this breach and part amicably when the time came. She decided she could make peace with his faults and prepare for a new chapter in her life. But the situation took an unexpected turn. One evening, Roger walked through the door carrying a small, unfamiliar bundle, a baby. His mistress had left the child at his workplace. Abandoned, fleeing to Europe, she left Roger, unprepared and overwhelmed, to care for their newborn. In a moment that would change the course of Jane's life, Roger looked to her, silently pleading, as though she would now have to shoulder the responsibility of his actions. Jane's reaction was immediate. She made it clear she had no intention of taking on this burden. Her children were grown, and her patience for caretaking had waned. This child, an innocent, yes, but also a living reminder of Roger's infidelity, was not part of the future she envisioned for herself. She had plans to move forward, to find peace after a painful ending. Caring for a newborn was nowhere in that plan. But just as Jane resolved to hold her ground, life intervened again. Roger suffered a heart attack, rendering him physically incapable of managing even his own care, let alone that of a baby. His vulnerability stirred a mix of emotions in Jane: pity, anger, even a residual sense of duty. But compassion had its limits. She'd already spent years forgiving, sacrificing, and compromising. This time, she would not bend. With Roger incapacitated, Jane began reaching out to the baby's biological family. The baby's grandparents were the only viable option she saw for the child's stable future. In a tense, emotional conversation, she gave them an ultimatum: take custody of their grandchild, or she would contact Child Protective Services, CPS. The response from Roger's family was one of shock, even anger. They accused her of coldness, of abandoning an innocent child. But to Jane, this wasn't about cruelty, it was about preserving the life she'd fought to reclaim. Her children, too, weighed in, urging her to stay and care for Roger and the baby. Their words stung, not because she disagreed, but because they were unwilling to step in themselves. They had their own lives, their own futures, free from the constraints they expected their mother to accept. Jane offered them a simple, clear option. If they truly believed their father needed care, they were welcome to come help. But neither accepted, leaving Jane alone with the burden they had placed on her. The hypocrisy gnawed at her. She felt as though society itself were telling her she had no right to choose herself, no right to demand her freedom. Friends, too, seemed to think she owed Roger something, as though 2 decades of marriage required her to sacrifice her peace indefinitely. The expectation was stifling. It was as if, by standing her ground, she was committing an unforgivable sin. Yet Jane knew she had given enough. Her reserves of compassion had run dry. As the days passed, her sense of conviction only grew. She knew the child needed a stable environment, one that would provide the love and attention she was unwilling to offer. When the grandparents finally arrived to take the baby, they scolded Jane for her detachment. "You could have made room in your heart," they said. But Jane was beyond guilt. She'd spent years making room for others, folding herself into shapes that suited everyone but herself. Then, another twist. Roger's heart attack led to complications. And within weeks, he passed away. With his death came a strange, conflicted freedom. She felt a sense of relief that the chapter had closed. But there was no joy in it, only a bittersweet realization that the life she had known was truly over. As Roger's widow, she found herself dealing not just with her own grief but also with expectations that she should care for his legacy. The child he'd left behind. The child's grandparents, now primary caregivers, reached out again, almost as if hoping Jane might change her mind. Her children, too, suggested that she step in, reminding her that, by proxy, this child was family. But Jane stood firm, drawing a line she had never dared to draw before. She would fulfill any legal requirements, providing financial support from Roger's estate if necessary. But she would not assume responsibility for the child's care. This was her boundary, and she would not waver. In the aftermath, Jane wrestled with her emotions, reflecting on the legacy of her choices. Some might see her as selfish, cold, even heartless, but Jane knew better. She had chosen herself not out of hatred or malice but out of a deep, long overdue respect for her own worth. For years, she had been a wife, a mother, a caretaker, roles that demanded constant giving, constant sacrifice. Now, for the first time, she had taken a stand, asserting her right to live a life unburdened by the consequences of someone else's choices. In quiet moments, she thought of the child, wondering if he would grow to understand why she had made this choice. Maybe he would judge her. Maybe others would, too. But she had learned that true strength lay not in appeasing others but in honoring oneself. As she looked toward the future, Jane felt a quiet, unshakable resolve. She had learned a valuable lesson in boundaries, one that would carry her forward in all her relationships. Forgiveness, she realized, did not mean abandoning oneself for others. In setting her boundaries, she had finally claimed her freedom. She would walk into the next chapter of her life with her head held high, knowing that sometimes, the hardest choices are the ones that liberate us. From heartbreak to healing, my journey through love, loss, and self-rediscovery. In this detailed, emotionally rich retelling, the story begins with the protagonist, a man who believes his life is perfectly in place. He's married to the love of his life, a woman he deeply respects and adores. They share a close bond, full of trust and companionship. Their relationship isn't just about romance. They've built a life together over 10 years, sharing dreams, creating memories, and supporting each other through life's highs and lows. This relationship is his anchor, grounding him in a world that can sometimes feel chaotic. But one morning, he finds his wife in an unexpected state, withdrawn and clearly distressed. As he gently presses her, sensing something deeper, she reveals that she's been grappling with a profound truth. She's come to realize she is a lesbian. His initial reaction is a mixture of disbelief, shock, and overwhelming grief. The life he thought they shared so openly and honestly now feels like it has cracks that he can't mend. It's a surreal moment, and he finds himself spiraling, struggling to grasp what this revelation truly means for both of them. The couple has a series of deep, emotional conversations over the following days. She assures him of her love and respect, expressing guilt and sadness for the pain her realization is causing. He understands that her self-discovery is not her fault, and while he tries to accept this reality, a part of him clings to the idea that they can continue, even if things will be different. His mind oscillates between a hope that they can redefine their relationship and an intense pain at the knowledge that her romantic feelings for him have changed irrevocably. This moment marks the beginning of an emotionally complex year for him, filled with unexpected twists and personal challenges. During this early period, he battles intense emotions. His self-esteem takes a hit, as he questions his worth and wonders if he could have done anything differently to prevent this outcome. He feels lost and unsure of his identity outside of their marriage. His inner monologue is raw and self-critical, and he often feels as though he's floating in a sea of painful memories, struggling to find a sense of direction. Their talks lead to them redefining boundaries. She expresses a willingness to stay, offering a platonic companionship and even giving him permission to explore other relationships if he chooses. Yet, he can't seem to detach from his feelings for her. The connection they shared, the moments of laughter, of whispered promises, of building dreams together, are etched into his heart. He yearns for her affection, and despite her efforts to console him, he realizes that his longing for her love and the security of their marriage can't easily be switched off. Amid his personal turmoil, he faces a cascade of family tragedies. His stepfather is diagnosed with terminal cancer, a loss that shakes him to the core. Only a few days later, His stepmother is also diagnosed. And although her treatment is more hopeful, his mind can hardly keep up with the emotional strain. His stepfather's death is a crushing blow. As he processes the grief, memories of his stepfather's wisdom and kindness linger, deepening his despair. This wave of loss feels relentless, and he reaches a breaking point. He withdraws from friends and family, haunted by thoughts of hopelessness. It's in these dark moments that he begins questioning his ability to move forward. The world feels unforgiving, and he finds himself wishing for an escape, desperate for a break from the relentless pain. It's only the support of his parents and close friends that keeps him grounded, though he often isolates himself, hiding his true feelings to avoid adding to their worries. With time, he decides to shift his focus outward. He leaves a high-stress job that was unsupportive during his time of need and finds a new role in music, a passion he'd set aside. This change brings a new sense of purpose, allowing him to rediscover a part of himself that was neglected during his marriage. He immerses himself in work, spending hours learning the craft and finding comfort in the routine of testing and fixing instruments. He reconnects with old friends and even takes part in a radio contest with a few buddies, an unexpected endeavor that wins them recognition. These moments of creativity and camaraderie provide a needed outlet, helping him channel his emotions constructively. His YouTube channel becomes another space for expression, even if its success isn't immediate. It's a small project with a friend, but it keeps him busy, and the laughter they share reminds him that joy still exists, even if it's hard to see at times. Over the year, he begins seeing a therapist, who helps him navigate the pain and self-doubt that surfaced after his wife's revelation. The therapy sessions allow him to address not only the grief from his marriage but also lingering insecurities he'd carried for years. In these sessions, he uncovers insights into his patterns of people-pleasing and realizes that he'd often neglected his own needs to ensure his wife's happiness. Therapy becomes a safe space for healing, and he gradually builds a sense of self-respect and inner peace. Just as he's starting to feel more stable, he meets a woman who, coincidentally, has gone through a similar experience. She is healing from a recent breakup, also rooted in questions of sexuality and self-identity. Their connection is easy and natural, marked by mutual respect and shared experiences. Together, they explore a new relationship, one that grows slowly but surely. She inspires him to try new things, painting, learning guitar, and the sense of rediscovering life's joys with someone who understands his journey brings him a renewed sense of hope. As he reflects on the year, he realizes how much he has grown. The heartbreak he once thought would consume him now feels like a part of his journey rather than the end of it. He comes to understand that sometimes love means letting go, accepting people for who they truly are, and finding strength in oneself. His ex-wife remains in his life as a friend, and he's grateful for the shared memories they carry. He can finally think of her without pain, seeing her as someone who helped him grow, even though their paths have diverged. Through his journey, he's learned to value resilience, to lean into his creativity, and to embrace life's unpredictability. His new relationship, his dream job, and the friendships he has nurtured along the way remind him that life offers second chances, even when it feels like all is lost. In the end, he closes with a message to anyone who may be facing a similar heartbreak, encouraging them to trust in the journey and to find their own paths to healing. He reflects on the importance of self-discovery and the ways life surprises us, urging viewers to embrace change and find hope in the possibility of new beginnings. This comprehensive retelling not only expands upon each moment but also weaves in universal lessons about resilience, letting go, and the strength found within even the darkest of times. The story is a testament to the power of healing and the hope that can be found in unexpected places, making it an emotionally resonant journey from heartbreak to a newfound love for life. The Day My Toddler Became a Hero, a mother's journey from trauma to healing. If you've ever had a moment where time seems to freeze, where you know that a single second could change everything, then maybe you'll understand the fear that's been running through me since that terrible day. I never thought I'd be sharing this with anyone outside my family. But I need to put it into words. Maybe it's a way to process. Or maybe it's just so I can breathe a little easier. All I know is that if it weren't for my toddler's brave heart and quick instincts, my world would be shattered right now. My name is Emma. I'm 25, married, with 2 children. A 3-year-old girl who is wise beyond her years and a newborn boy who's brought nothing but light into our lives. My husband, Jack, is 30, and we've been together since 2018. Jack is a good man. Someone who loves deeply but is often lost in his own thoughts. A quality that I used to find endearing, if a bit frustrating, but that day, I realized how much harm a wandering mind could cause, even in someone you love with all your heart. It was a typical evening. I was folding clothes, trying to keep up with the endless chores that come with a newborn and a toddler. The house was quiet, just the gentle hum of the washing machine, when suddenly, I heard my daughter's voice from outside. Her scream was so piercing, so frantic, that I knew something was wrong before I even understood what she was saying. "Dad, help," she cried, and in that split second, my heart sank. I dropped everything, running outside despite the recent C-section that still made every movement feel like tearing. And there it was, the stroller. My newborn son, rolling down the street towards traffic. My blood ran cold. I sprinted harder than I ever had in my life, barely managing to stop the stroller just before it reached the edge. In those few seconds, my entire world flashed before me. The what-ifs circled in my head like a terrible storm, threatening to consume me. I snatched my son up, checking his tiny face, his hands, his little feet, as if just holding him could undo what almost happened. And then I looked around, searching for Jack. He was standing several yards away, on our neighbor's driveway, chatting casually with them, completely oblivious to the chaos that had just unfolded. I stormed over to him, holding our baby close, feeling a rage I hadn't known was in me. How could you not hear her scream?" I shouted, not caring who heard. He looked at me, stunned. Before the horror of what almost happened dawned on him, he began to apologize, saying he hadn't noticed, calling it an honest mistake. But to me, it felt unforgivable. It was a mistake that could have cost us our son's life. In my anger and heartbreak, I packed up the kids and drove to my parents' house. They were as shocked as I was, urging me to take some time, to let the weight of what happened sink in. They stood by my side, but the betrayal I felt lingered like a wound that refused to heal. Over the next few days, I went over every detail in my mind, questioning not only what had happened but also the very foundation of our marriage. Jack had always been a little inattentive, but this was beyond any small oversight. The idea that he could be so careless, that he could ignore our daughter's frantic screams, left me feeling that I couldn't trust him with our children's safety. As I scrolled through my messages, seeing Jack's apologies, something in me resisted. How could I believe it wouldn't happen again? What if next time, I wasn't around to stop it? My father's words echoed in my mind. "Emma, I'd rather help you with a divorce than help you bury your child." The weight of that statement was crushing. I started reflecting on the life Jack and I had built together. I thought about our dating years, how Jack's occasional absent-mindedness was almost endearing back then. But as we grew into our roles as parents, that absent-mindedness became more challenging, especially with young children who needed constant attention. Jack's struggles with ADHD had always been there, but this incident forced me to question if it was an obstacle we could truly overcome as a family. I reached out to a support group for parents who are partners with someone with ADHD. I read stories from spouses who had similar struggles, each one a different version of the same fear and frustration. They shared their coping strategies. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Jack's ADHD wasn't just an obstacle, it was a risk. I knew I had to set boundaries, for my children's safety and for my peace of mind. In the days that followed, I spoke to friends who were also parents. One of my closest friends, Sarah, shared her own close call. She had turned her back for just a moment, and her toddler had nearly fallen down a flight of stairs. We laughed about it at the time, chalking it up to just one of those things that happens. But deep down, we both knew that parenting is filled with these narrow escapes. Every parent I spoke to had a similar story, each one a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong. One mother recounted a heart-stopping moment at a shopping mall when her son darted away from her and nearly got lost. She, too, had wondered if it was worth the constant anxiety. I found comfort in knowing I wasn't alone. But that comfort didn't erase the lingering fear that Jack might not be able to keep our children safe. My neighbor sent me the security footage from their home, and watching it felt surreal. There was Jack, pushing the stroller, our toddler skipping ahead, as they neared the neighbor's house. Jack stopped, leaving the stroller on a slight incline while he walked up the driveway to talk to them. He didn't even look back at the stroller. 5 minutes passed before the stroller started moving. Slowly at first, then picking up speed as it rolled down the road. Seeing it all unfold brought a fresh wave of horror. Jack's negligence was undeniable, and the sight of my daughter frantically chasing after the stroller was a reminder that she had been the one protecting her little brother that day, not her father. Jack came to my parents' house. His eyes filled with regret. He admitted he had been careless, that he needed help with his ADHD, and that he would do whatever it took to make things right. Part of me wanted to believe him, but the other part, the part that had watched the footage, knew that trust would take time to rebuild. We agreed on a plan. Jack would start therapy, exploring ways to manage his ADHD. We would set up new routines and safety measures, and I would give him a chance to prove that he could change. I told him, firmly, that this was his last chance to show me he could be the father our children needed. As I write this, I'm still haunted by what could have happened. My children are safe, and I'm grateful, but that gratitude doesn't erase the trauma. Every time I hear my daughter's voice or see my son's innocent face, I'm reminded of how fragile our lives are. I'm learning to forgive, not just Jack, but also myself. Parenting is filled with moments that test our strength, our patience, and our ability to forgive. In facing this nightmare, I found resilience I didn't know I had. I've come to understand that love is about more than forgiving mistakes. It's about building a life where those mistakes aren't repeated, where everyone is committed to growth and safety. This experience has taught me that while forgiveness is essential, so is accountability. My children deserve a safe home, and I'm determined to provide that, even if it means standing up to the people I love most. This journey hasn't been easy, but it has shown me the strength of my own spirit, the depth of a mother's love, and the courage it takes to hold on to hope even after the unthinkable. The day my toddler saved her brother will remain etched in my memory forever. A day of terror and grace, but it's also a reminder that, in every crisis, we have a choice: to let fear consume us or to let love guide us forward.